and welcome to the Human Echoes podcast, the show where we review oddball movies, have oddball discussions, and occasionally take questions from you, the oddball fans.
I'm Tony Southcott.
I'm Albert Berg, and the oddball movie that we are reviewing this week is a movie that Tony suggested. Tony, talk us through a little bit of why you were interested in seeing this movie.
Well, part of the reason is I've talked about this over and over again. Like the Stanley Horror Film Festival is easily my favorite film festival I've been to. I've only been to like 4, but that one stood above the rest. And We Are Still Here was one of those movies that got a lot of heat at the festival because people were really excited to see it, especially after the first showing. I think a little bit had to do with the fact that Barbara Crampton, who is the lead actress in this movie, was there for, I think it was the 25th anniversary of Reanimator, and she was there to debut this movie along with Sunchoke. She, like, all of a sudden found herself in a lot of weird indie films at the same time. But it was cool getting to see her there, and I missed out on getting to see it at that time because basically the theater was full. They filled up like 400 seats. And I was not able to get into this one.
Well, 400 people, I would expect were disappointed.
No, this was one of those that like everybody was talking about afterwards. But there's a funny thing that happens at film festivals where if there's something that's above the average of the film festival, it suddenly turns to gold. They call it like the Sundance effect. And they're saying that Swiss Army Man and movies like that are probably experiencing a little bit of that. Because people go through 5 movies that are just kind of like, it was okay. And then all of a sudden, this one different thing comes on the screen and just like blows people's minds. It happened to me a little bit at this festival with The Hallow, which according to Netflix is like a 3-star movie for me. And I thought that was 5 stars at the time, but I had seen 4 slow burn movies in a row. So having like some crazy action thing from Ireland was enough to just like elevate it in my mind.
Okay. Well, I don't... No offense to Mrs. Crampton, but this movie did not do much for me. I think it had me at about 2.5 to 3 stars for Netflix. You know, they're sort of like, we think you'll feel this way about it. And I'm about at a 2-star for this movie.
I think in moments it could be up to a 3-star, but it just felt like I couldn't connect with the characters enough to really push it above that. There were times where it felt like they just didn't quite get enough takes to make the dialogue just flow right. There were a lot of little technical issues like that. And it's not even that these are bad actors. I've seen them in a lot of things before. It just didn't quite work.
Well, I'll give a quick rundown here for those of you who haven't seen the movie or aren't familiar with it. This is a sort of haunted house story. We have a couple, somewhat elderly, not old, but like 50s, 60s. And they are coming to this house after the death of their son. They're looking to start over. We don't get a ton of backstory for them. We just know that they've moved to this new town and they move into a haunted house. And it's a very standard haunting story for most of the movie up until the final 15 minutes, which I think we're going to spoil. Usually I don't feel too bad about spoiling a movie if I thought it was not that great, but if you don't want to know anything about this movie, maybe skip past the review portion.
Yeah, like go up to, like, this isn't a movie we're going to spend like 35 minutes analyzing every like little detail. So if you skip to about 25-30 minutes, you'll be past the movie review. It is on Netflix, so if you really want to check it out, hit pause on this, check it out, and then come back.
But the parts of the movie that I thought were really good, Tony, I did enjoy a lot of the haunting aspects. I thought this movie had a pretty good handle on its cinematography for a lot of it. It's nothing super gorgeous, but it wasn't bad. It's not like this is just garbage indie filmmaking. It was okay. And a lot of the scares I thought were really good and effective. You know, they happened kind of over and over and they were sort of the same, but I liked the effects, I call them creature effects, but they're not. I mean, they're people in makeup. A lot. Makeup effects were amazing.
Yeah, the burned up people look incredible, and I love that whenever they like graze something, you see the sparks come off of them like they're still hot.
And they have that wave like of heat coming off of them, like they're still partially burning, and they have like the whited out eyes and all that. Like those monsters are great, and the way that they're shown is great. There's several times where you'll see just shadows in the background, or you'll see things move, and they do a good job in the scenes of the scares where they'll build up tension, and it's a very standard horror type thing, but still they don't mess that up. And I thought that was good. I actually got scared several times in this movie, Tony. I was like, oh no.
And a lot of it is all of a sudden a light switches off and you see the shadow in the corner and things like that. So it's nothing new. It's just very well executed for.
Well, they're making a whole movie about that this summer, Tony, which I feel like is maybe stretching that whole concept a little bit far, but a lot of people are excited about it. So who am I to rain on their parade?
Side question about Lights Out and James Wan. Do you think that if we hadn't seen a movie like The Conjuring 2 last week, do you think that this movie would have stood a little bit taller? Like, because we saw a haunted house movie last week in The Conjuring 2 that was pretty solid. Like, it was a scary movie. It had it had really good effects. You cared about the characters. Like, do you think that kind of overshadowed this?
Maybe, but honestly, I think that this movie had a lot of potential. The place where this movie goes off the rails for me is that it never knows like what story it wants to tell. There is a very slapdash, haphazard, thrown together feel to this movie. Again, not in the craftsmanship of the individual scenes, but the way that scenes are put together in order. There are characters that just show up and it feels like the writer was sitting there at his keyboard thinking, oh, we don't have enough pages. They have 2 kids and they show up and they don't interact with anybody, but they totally get killed by the ghosts. And
yeah, that seems like it was almost done in post.
It does. I was actually watching to see, do they actually reference those kids after that?
They do a couple times where they're like, oh, I'm sure they'll get here. Like, yeah, little things like that.
They don't even get worried. They're not like, why aren't they here? They said they were on their way. There's nothing like that.
There's one point where she's worried, like where the woman who was Vampira in Ed Wood, like she was worried about her kids for a little bit. So
I did not realize that actress was there, by the way. That's a great she's good.
Yeah, she is. Like, and that's why I was saying, like, I felt like they maybe didn't do quite enough in getting a performance out of those actors, because we've seen her act and she's good. She's really natural. And in this, she's like a hippie character, but she feels a little bit wooden.
And there was some great moments of like humor that played into horror eventually, where, you know, the hippie husband is saying, oh, hey, what do you think you're going to do? We're going to hold a seance a second you're out of the door? Go. And they like leave the door and he starts setting up candles and the other husband's like, what are you doing? He's like, we're holding a seance. She wouldn't and I love that. And then like his moment of transformation where he turns into like super evil voice and saying, get out of the house. But they didn't, the whole setup. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that is Larry Fassenden, who we've seen in pretty much every Mickey Keating movie so far.
Oh, yeah. I knew he's looked kind of familiar.
Yeah, he's pretty awesome. Like, he might not be the most spectacular actor out there, but he's really good at playing that oddball guy with the weird hair. And like, he's not what you would expect to see from a Hollywood actor. He's not like the handsome, hunky guy. He's just the kind of comic relief and sometimes really messed up guy.
And in this movie's praise, I will say that it's not like, it does go away from the sort of standard stereotypes of who is the star of one of these types of movies. It's not like a bunch of teens going on some trip somewhere and they meet, like, I don't know what it is with teens. Why do we always got to have teens? It's great to see some old people, older, you know, like real, like your mom or your dad or whatever type old people, my mom or my dad, going and dealing with a haunted house, and they're not like crazy weird. I was happy to see a different type of person in one of these haunted houses. And that's also one of the strengths of the Conjuring, honestly, is that you have that family there, right? And you feel the sort of terror on that family. And then you have Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are not, they're
like mid-40s couple, like that sort of thing.
And you have that sort of, these feel like real people kind of interactions. And that was a good strength of the movie. The problem is that the movie doesn't know what kind of ghost it wants to do, because it starts out and I mean, these ghosts legit straight up kill people.
Yeah.
Like they're not like, ooh, walking around, we're going to scare you to death ghosts.
They're like chest burster like style, like through the back, like just a hand through the chest while somebody's driving, which is also weird for me whenever like the ghost can just leave the property whenever they want to. Like I've always thought that was a little bit inconsistent with like a haunting.
They had sort of like a weird reality warping, like actually warping reality, but maybe she thought she was driving away, but she wasn't. But then we cut to that wide shot of the car swerving off the road, which made me think that she actually had left the property. Who knows? That is, I will say, consistency wise, they do establish that the ghosts can leave the house, and that is in fact one of the reasons they're trying to get them to eat this family.
That's true. Like they're saying every 30 years the house wakes up and the town has to sacrifice.
But the way the movie ultimately wraps up, it's they're trying to make the ghosts sympathetic at the end. They're trying to say, oh, hey, they really want to attack the townsfolk. They're not there to, sort of beat up this poor family. They didn't eat them the first chance they could get. The guy comes in, he's like, why didn't you get them? They've been here for 2 weeks. And you don't get a real good answer that also sort of establishes why they would have then killed 2 random innocent children and their friends that came over. Those people weren't in on the crime.
But they were trying to have the sexy times.
They didn't even get their clothes off, Tony.
Yeah, like she grabbed his tie and was acting kind of playful, and then all of a sudden it's like, that whore.
It's just, it didn't, that ending sequence too was so over the top. They send an army of townsfolk into the house, and the house just starts eating them at some point. So
I
people
gotta admit that was pretty fun. Like, I didn't get to finish that until this morning. Like it was one of the rare times I tapped out on a movie at pretty late, but I just needed some sleep because I wasn't even paying attention to the film for about 10 minutes. I was like, all right, I gotta stop. And like, whenever I started watching that this morning, I'm drinking my Rockstar. I'm like, this is probably my favorite part of the movie, even if it doesn't like feel like the rest of the movie.
That was the problem. I liked the sequence. I liked, like, again, on its own, there was some great effects. The blood splattering everywhere. They had
some of the kills were fantastic there. Like, you've got one point where you just see like the flesh burning under Dagmar, who is the name of the main bad guy ghost, like the main patriarch of that family, anyway. And like the way it just like tears in, it reminded me so much of like an 80s horror movie. Like a lot of the effects in this, as far as like the deaths, really did kind of harken back to the old only physical like prop effects where things just rip and pop and all that. It was pretty fun for that.
Like I said, that scene on its own, if you can just go find it on YouTube or somewhere and just watch that scene, that's great. But it doesn't fit with the tone of the rest of the movie. They didn't actually make it work with everything else they established, where the ghosts actually were tormenting people that didn't have anything to do. I mean, even that electrician, right? The guy that calls his electrician, he specifies, apparently has a family friend electrician who's not part of this cult town.
I thought that was actually kind of an odd thing to say. Like, it felt very, very possessive whenever he's yelling over the phone. He's like, he almost killed my electrician. It's like, there's not many people who would call my dad their plumber. Like,
maybe he has a lot of electrical issues in his old house. It's like, dude, stop plugging this, this giant power strip into other giant power strips. I keep telling you, you're going to blow the breaker.
But I need an extension cord. What's the worst you've ever daisy chained like those together?
Oh, I don't. I can't. I've never daisy chained a power strip into another power strip.
Whenever I was working for the school district, we had to do some pretty questionable stuff with that to make sure these laptop carts would charge. And these laptop carts pull more power than anything I've ever seen. Like, they just blow breakers all the time. We went through like 2 extension cords and 2 power strips daisy chained onto each other into the cart, which is 24, a power strip of 24, like going into that. So it just got nutty. You're not even supposed to plug 2 of the cables into one breaker, and we just had to do it because that's what our principal ordered us to do. One of them caught fire. It was a very small fire. Lots of sparks. I got shocked by one once. It was kind of lame, but it didn't hurt that bad.
But you still don't have your own personal electrician, right?
I know. Like, well, I'm sure I could call my uncle. He's an electrician. I could maybe call him my electrician. But he's got Parkinson's now, so it's a little bit hard for him to, like, deal with all the loose wiring.
They don't establish that I can recall what this couple does for a living. Maybe he's a contractor. Maybe he knows this guy from, like, building stuff that he's actually done in the past, Tony.
He kind of looks like that and carries himself like that. He seems like an entrepreneurial type.
The other thing that really, the other kill that really, I think it was a kill. I'm not even 100% sure this person died, Tony. But when they're in the diner, not the family, but they go to the diner, everybody's looking at them. The whole town is in on this secret, and nobody ever comes to the town, and nobody ever leaves and talks to anybody, because that's how the story is.
And then the waitress answers the door. Is that the one you're talking about?
The one woman sends the waitress to answer the door. There's something that sounds like a gunshot. She
then
doesn't
you hear
come
a
back.
meaty thud.
Right. She never comes back. The bad guy walks in. just to talk to the woman, and he's just like, yeah, we got to deal with those people.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
What was that?
Like that was the one where I was most questioning. I mean, I know they're establishing this guy is the bad guy, but I think they did that enough with him being the weirdo that comes over and menaces everybody, and his wife is handing him letters saying to get out. And I did like aspects of that character. That just seemed completely unnecessary, because if that waitress is like not in on the secret, all he'd have to do is be like, he'd have to walk in and he'd be like, hey, can we use your office? Or hey, can she go in the kitchen? Like, it doesn't make sense that he's just gonna blast her.
It almost feels like the kind of thing that they were in post, like, we really need to punch up how evil this guy is. What if we cut out the rest of her scenes and then cut in the sound effect of a gunshot and a body thump, and that'll just be good, right? That's how I think that must have happened. That's
a little bit what it felt like. The only thing that's different there is you did have a very visceral reaction from the woman in the restaurant. Like, where she's full on shocked that just happened. So I don't know if that was a post thing or if that was just a weird writing thing.
I don't like that. And that was a cool idea. When it happened, I was like, oh crap.
Yeah,
like that
it
was
definitely
a big deal.
hit me. It just,
but they never followed it up. Nobody ever said anything about it again.
You never
like
see
they never showed her body. Yeah. What was that? I don't like, why did she need to die? What was that establishing? Nothing about that made any sense.
Yeah. And the thing about this movie is it is pretty short, so it packs a lot into about an hour and 20 minutes. So it's not like you're going to be wasting a ton of time if you go and check this thing out. But I think you guys are going to be seeing a lot of the same little quirks that we did, like seeing how close this came to being a really, really good haunted house movie, and just a few miscues and a few character issues just really kind of borked it up.
It really felt like the kind of film that was rewritten like as it was being shot, and they were like, oh, we have some stuff in the can that kind of contradicts this. We'll just sort of wallpaper it over and cut around it and it'll be fine. Like, you hear about that kind of thing on big studio projects where there's a lot of executive meddling or things coming in, but I don't know if I've ever seen, I mean, maybe I have, and I'm not thinking of it, but like this is one of the sort of a rare instance where that happens with a smaller film. And it really shows. You really feel that something was off in the background of making this movie. They didn't quite know the kind of movie they wanted to make. They didn't quite know the story they wanted to tell. They had a lot of talent. I mean, I think that there was a lot of talent involved, but it was not directed at the storytelling.
Yeah, and this was actually written and directed by one guy. His name is Ted Geoghegan. Geoghegan. It's a name I haven't seen before. I'm trying to see what else he's done. Like
that almost doesn't make sense that it's one guy though. I mean, if this is his singular vision, I don't know. I just don't understand. He's not, again, the directing in this movie's fine. It looks good. He got okay. I didn't really have a problem with many of the performances. It's confusing. I don't know. I've never made a movie, so maybe I'm being overly critical, but it doesn't feel like it was all shot as what. It's almost like two separate stories that kind of got squished together without a lot of care taken to like get rid of the seams. If you're gonna make this ghost house a benevolent type, we're just out to get revenge on the town, we don't want you guys, then don't make it kill random innocent bystanders.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose you're saying that some of the random innocent bystanders were killed by other people, but like the house was not discriminate in the beginning.
Right. And it
had a really weird like shaft where it just randomly spat blood occasionally.
I like that. I like that as sort of the idea that this house is just a wood chipper for bodies and the blood's like sort of Fargo style.
Yeah.
That was, although they never, another thing that I feel like is a failure here, they show that hole like 4 or 5 times, right? And people look into the hole. You don't, that's a Chekhov's hole.
Yeah.
All right. That is Chekhov's hole. You got to go in the hole. I'm making that seems very obscene now that I've thought about making the circle with my finger. But it's like, you go through the hole into the weird, creepy part of the basement.
Chekhov's basement dungeon or something like that.
No,
his foundation
that's
issues.
Not nearly as funny.
Chekhov's cracked foundation.
Now we're talking about cracks, Tony.
Cracks and holes.
It felt like that they didn't quite know what they wanted to do, and I was disappointed by that. I was looking forward to liking this movie again because it scared me in the beginning, because I thought it was pretty well crafted, and it ended up disappointing me. And so for that reason, I can't really recommend it.
And I'm kind of in the same boat. Like, I'm usually a little more lenient on these sorts of things, but there were too many nagging questions for me to give it a full endorsement. Like I said, it's not super long, so you're not going to be wasting a ton of time. If you're a huge horror fan, you should probably see it, I guess. Yeah, not much of an endorsement.
You should probably see it, I guess, if you really, really, really like being scared after you see James Wan's Conjuring.
Yeah. The Conjuring 2 will scare you more than this movie does. This movie is just, like, it has its spots.
Conjuring 2 is brilliant, by the way. A little bit long.
Yeah.
I was in that theater and I was like, I've got to pee after a while.
Well, I knew I had to do the review that night, and I missed out on the 7 o'clock showing because of the stream, so it's like I had to go to the 10 o'clock showing. All of a sudden, it's a little bit past 1 whenever I get back to the house. It was just, that was a long movie.
There's a lot of stuff in there, and you can tell they even cut a lot of stuff out with the haunting. There's a part where they start getting haunted, and then you cut to 6 or 7 months later when they're being interviewed, and they're saying, "Oh yeah, lots of stuff moves around. It's weird," and you can tell that they've skipped over a large portion of the, the family's ordeal, which was, it was put together really well. I'm not saying man, there's a lot of fat on that movie, but it did feel like it could have been shorter if they really wanted it to be. James Wan though is on point. That dude, really effective filmmaker, especially after seeing Fast 7, right? Was the one he did?
Yep. And now isn't he doing the new Star Trek? No, that's Jason Lin. Never mind.
No. That's Justin Lin, who was on Fast 6 and Fast 5 and Fast and Furious and Too Fast, Too Furious and Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. No, he didn't do Too Fast, Too Furious. He came in Tokyo Drift. Anyway, point being, Justin Lin doing Star Trek now, which, as a tangential thing, the guy who played Chekhov died this week in a freak accident.
Anton, what is it?
Yelchin?
Yeah, Yelchin. Or Yelchin.
That's okay. I hope that's right, because I kind of pulled that out of my memory, and my memory's not great. I don't know a lot about him as an actor.
Yelchin.
But it's okay.
The thing is, I really liked him in all the movies I saw him in. Like, Terminator Salvation had a lot of issues, but it definitely wasn't with his character.
Who did he play in that?
He was, I think it was Michael Reese, something like that.
Kyle Reese.
Kyle Reese. Yes.
I'm pretty sure.
Sorry, I forgot the first name. He's the character that's in Terminator 1, played by Michael Biehn, and this is the past version of him, or the future version of him, I guess. But he's in Terminator Salvation. He was really good in Odd Thomas, which is a movie that I thought should have gotten a lot more praise. That was just a well-crafted movie that never got a very wide release. It was really expensive to make, too. I had a lot of fun with it. He's been in, he was Chekhov in the new Star Trek. And the way he died was just so senseless. It just sucks.
I was gonna say, it's almost, I want to say stupid, and not to deride him or anything about the situation, but it's talk about just your absolute random, how did that happen
type thing.
Yeah, you think, and I may be a little bit morbid, and I spend some time thinking about, okay, how am I most likely to die today? And usually it's car accident, unless there's, sometimes it's aneurysm, but most of the time it's car accident. But you don't think about this kind of car accident where apparently he had some kind of weird shifter in his car, and he didn't, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was in neutral.
Park.
And basically he got out to get his mail, and the car rolled forward and crushed him against the wall or the mailbox.
It's
just a senseless death. It sucks terribly, especially because he was 27 years old. He had a huge prime ahead of him. He was already in all these different franchises. He had nowhere to go but up, and it was he was a fun guy. And I actually was listening to a panel about the new Star Trek that he's prominent, very prominently in. Chekhov and Bones have a much bigger role in this movie, from what Carl Urban was saying. And then the next day you're reading about how he's gone.
And it's gotta suck for everybody involved with Star Trek, especially because, first of all, Justin Lin, talk about your bad luck bear.
Yeah.
Not that it's his fault, but I'm feeling for the guy, because he directs Paul Walker in 4 or 5 films, right? And basically puts that guy, in the role of his lifetime, and ends up, he ends up dying in a terrible freak car accident, and now he's here with this guy, puts him in a bigger part in the movie. I'm not trying to make a joke, because there's a joke here that you could go down, and that maybe will be appropriate like 2 or 3 years from now, but right now it sucks to be anybody associated with that movie, because you have this, they have to promote it, right? They're gonna have to go out there and talk about Star Trek. Everybody's gonna ask them about this guy, now that he's gone. What did you think about him? And you're just gonna have to like deal with that question over and over and over again. Not like, what about the next Star Trek or Star Wars movie, or what about this? It's gonna be like, hey, what about the guy that died that you were in 3 different movies with? And probably, I mean, even if he didn't have a giant role in like the first one, it's still,
he still had like little memorable moments where he's like even just trying to pronounce Victor.
That is the moment for me that I was like, man, that guy is gone now. It sucks. Not a great year for celebrities being alive,
No,
Tony.
It hasn't been. Like, my friends and I were thinking about, like, if you had a Deadpool, who would you be picking next? It's like, it's going to be like Elton John or some other like major singer from the past.
Oh, that's getting way morbid. All right, let's steer away from like who dies next. Let's just let that happen as it will, Tony, and not be a part of who do you think? That's how I feel about that.
I like a friend of mine did show me a site where he has signed up for a Deadpool, though. Like, where you basically get points based on that, and they put money on who's going to win by the end of the year. Some people are even more morbid than I am.
No. I mean, they are, but I don't want to, let's move on to something else, Tony.
We did have a question that's kind of related to the movie.
Okay, hit me.
Let's see. My sister actually texted me this question, so why do all poltergeists have to be evil? Can't we just have a neat freak ghost, or one who likes to sing in the shower?
You don't make a movie about that, right? Like that, you have Casper the Friendly Ghost if you make that movie.
Yeah, I think you probably could make that movie, but there would still be like oppositional ghosts, or maybe like you could have it to where the person, like the Exorcist, is really the bad guy. Like
well, that would be interesting.
He just really likes the house, and like the Exorcist comes in, is like trying to kick him out.
Or the Exorcist like brought the poltergeist, and the poltergeist doesn't want to do it, and he like implants it. He like puts some weird bones or something under the house, and he's actually got this real estate scheme going on. That's a movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you could take that. I think it could be a lot of fun to actually throw that genre, just do it backwards. I'm sure there's an arena story at least in that. But I think you're right. I've seen where some of the ghosts can be nice and friendly. Like the Frighteners had those pair of ghosts that were kind of helping Michael J. Fox by pretending to like haunt homes, and they could move stuff around and they could do all that, but they really it wasn't focused on them.
Well, we've seen a couple of we keep coming back to this movie because in my mind it breaks so many rules and yet still abides by them in a weird way. Guillermo del Toro's The Devil's Backbone. Right, like that's a ghost that you think is one way through the whole movie, and you're actually legitimately frightened of him. And then once you get through, you understand, oh, okay, he wasn't like he didn't mean to scare them. He's just a ghost, and they're freaked out by ghosts. And also, he had some deals with some people that did him bad. That's a good way to go, and not enough movies do that anymore. There's so many, you just want to be afraid of them. You just want them to have them bad. I'm not going to call it a ghost, but the entity in The Boy was a little bit like that as well. Although that's sort of, it ends up being kind of hostile, but it is nice when you have sort of an explanation for, I'm not going to spoil The Boy, because I actually like that movie. Now I have to cut this entire conversation about The Boy.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to post spoilers for The Boy.
Tony, yes. After y'all should watch it though, for real. I liked it. I thought it got a bad rap.
Yeah, it definitely didn't light up like Rotten Tomatoes or anything like that, but it seemed interesting from the trailers, and it's in Redbox and in rental places now, so I'm sure we should all go get it. I'm not going to see it because Al spoiled it though.
I didn't spoil you.
You don't know what a spoiler is. We actually had a conversation about that at Comic-Con, Ellie and I, because I was wearing the no spoiler shirt, and she's like, just because of the podcast you're on, you shouldn't be allowed to wear that shirt.
Listen, all right, the movie came out in theaters. It was in theaters for a solid month. Then it was on VOD. Now it's in Redbox. It's been in Redbox for a solid month. There is a statute of limitations on this stuff.
Yeah, it's like whenever it's in the 70s or earlier, that's the statute of limitations.
No, it's not.
30 years.
That is not true.
I give it 30 years before we can spoil something outright. If it was,
I'm done now.
If it was before
I don't have anything
I
else
was born,
to say.
It's okay to spoil.
I've been infuriated. Nobody saw it, and it's my fault for having gone to see it and be excited about it and trying to tell people, hey, you should go see this movie. Did a whole review where I was like, hey guys, this is better than they're saying. You should really check it out. Nobody listened to me. You didn't listen to me. Nobody else listened to me. But they're sure gonna give me crap for spoiling the movie they had no interest in.
I had interest in it. I just didn't have enough interest to see it in theaters after I read about what people were saying.
They were wrong, Tony.
I was going to DVD that shit.
Speaking of movies that you could DVD, I recently saw a movie that got panned pretty hard, and I understand why it got panned pretty hard. When I watched that Agent 47 movie, that is like a fun bad movie.
Is that the Hitman one?
Yes. Where that's just like nothing but action scenes and like little bits of talking here and there, and then we have another action scene, and it makes no sense. And this is a spoiler for the end of Hitman, but they try to do like 3 different, oh, by the way, we're gonna have a sequel things at the end of that movie. They're not gonna have a sequel, but it was so adorable to see them try so hard to say like, guys, come back, we're gonna do another one.
I did like the person they picked for this one after seeing him in Homeland, because he was kind of a CIA really badass guy. So I could definitely see him as that hitman role. I don't know if he ended up pulling it off well, or like what the reason is that the movie just kind of flopped. It's like what?
Well, he was bald and he was emotionless. Does that describe the hitman?
Pretty much. Like if you play the video games, that's it. Like he might be a little bit like highly sophisticated. You might add that to it. But he's
definitely. He also has a great Jason thing where he never runs.
I like that.
Like
because in the game,
just walks after everybody really stoutly.
In the game, like you might have a little bit of a jog, but you're never like sprinting away from stuff. You're always trying to be the very slow moving guy that's not attracting attention. That's like going in for the quiet assassination.
It's very stupid. I mean, I don't want to oversell, but if you're like, so people talk about movies that they really like, and they're like, oh man, that just like wrecked me emotionally. Sometimes my emotions don't need to be wrecked. Sometimes I just want to like see something that I can just sort of veg out to. And Hitman was a great veg out session.
Yeah, it's like
there's even a bit where they do something at one point and like it comes into play in an assassination like 10 minutes later, where they turn something on and then they use it for an assassination, which sort of echoes some of the stuff in the video game. I haven't played the video game extensively. It seems like it wanted to be a little bit more serious than the video game is. The video
I don't
game
know.
seems
There's a lot of stuff in the video game that's just slapsticky. You can make it very, very serious and just garrote people and do all that, but you can also like rig a grill to explode so that they blow a bunch of people into a pool, or you can like do terrible things to clowns. There's so many different things you can do in that.
And they don't do that's what I'm saying. The downside of the movie is they don't do very much of the silliness. I mean, it's a silly movie, but it's taking itself very seriously. The closest that you ever get is there's a shot of a different person being assassinated, then like has nothing to do with the main plot. Like it's just somebody gets a call and they've just got done assassinating somebody, and they've been assassinated by throwing a toaster into a bathtub. You just get like a pan over the bathtub shot of the toaster like floating in there with a little rubber ducky and the guy's feet sticking up. That's the silliest kill in the movie. Other than that, it wants to be taking itself seriously. It ends up being pretty silly, but I liked it, and especially that ending. I won't give specifics, but they like they sort of get to finish up their whole deal, and then there's like a boom, 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 but what happens next? You guys didn't earn any money at the box office, so nothing happens next, is what the deal is there.
I'm one of those guys who's a fan of glitches in video games. Like, I love seeing whenever things just go terribly, terribly wrong, and, like, faces disappear and weird, like, you get launched in the air, that sort of thing. Gavin Free from Achievement Hunter made a video from the most recent Hitman game that's kind of an exploit, where you just set this puddle to like electrocute everybody, and basically you just kite everyone back to that. You get them mad and they chase after you, or they're coming to look at the pile of bodies. And he got maybe 130 people into this pile of bodies that was being electrocuted, and people just kept walking up and like pointing at it and then falling into the pile. It was one of the weirdest but kind of more entertaining videos I've ever seen for Hitman.
It's one of those things that makes you sad that the game like starts to freak out after you get a certain number of bodies.
The frame rate just dies, and like I'm pretty sure it was on PS4, and he basically like he killed the PS4. It had to restart.
In those games, is there ever a scenario where you can kill all the people?
In Hitman, you actually can clear out the entire map if you want to. You just don't get the bonus points for it. Because
right.
Like you can straight up just do a code and get like crazy guns and things like that, but you're trying to kill like 1 or 2 people on the map, or somebody that's going to spot you. Like, so you'll kill a guard, drag him in there and put him in like a dumpster or things like that. But for the most part, you can just go through the entire map if you want to.
But they won't keep spawning new people is what I'm asking, because
not in the old version. I think in the new one, it respawns people because you can have so many more sprites on a map.
Okay.
I guess they're not really sprites that like you can have more just bodies.
I never thought about this until just now, but in that, because I saw that video as well, it would be amazing if in that video you got all the people, like they just all came, and then you just walk through the map and nobody was left.
You just win the objective like right away.
But that's not how video games work, at least not anymore. Although Descent works like that, weirdly enough. Like Descent, there are robot generator things, but most of the time if you go through a hallway and you kill something and there's no generator, like it's just clear from then on, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, we found a different type of monster generator in the Minecraft stream this week.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, remember falling into the hole, into that abyss?
Well, yeah.
Joseph killed us all.
Joseph and his wacky upside down pyramid scheme. Or right side up pyramid scheme. Well,
it turned into a diamond, sort of. With
the pyramid at the bottom.
Yeah.
It's 3 funnels. I don't know what it was. Point being, I lost all my good stuff. I went and enchanted a bow. I had like not infinity, was it infinity where it just like keep shooting arrows?
Infinity and flame and all that.
Well, no, that was you. I just had infinity. I didn't go that far. I just went to John Jones' place and I was like, I'm going to get one of these infinity books, put it on my bow, and I was good. And I'm not like the best Minecraft player, as you may know, but I'm okay. And then that happened and I had nothing left, and now I'm running around naked again.
Same here. I had a lot of good.
It's frustrating.
Damn it.
It was just a hole in the ground too. Like he was just like, I think I'll just dig this dark pit and not put anything in there. Maybe I'll put something in there later. Oh wait, I can't because there's all the bad guys.
1,000 monsters in a pit.
Was not happy about that. You guys can go back and check out our Minecraft streams though. They're saved on our YouTube channel. And every other Thursday we do that. This Thursday it's
the Humane Shows.
Yeah, The Sims 4. You can pee in a bush now. That's the new hotness.
You can woohoo in a bush. You can pee in the bush.
You can woohoo in a bush after you've peed and pooped in the bush, and then if you're tired after the woohoo, you can sleep in the bush that you woohooed and pooped and peed in.
It's a very powerful.
We are
bush.
living in the future,
and the flowers look like hearts too.
Now I want to think, like, can you just make a lot where there's nothing but a bush for the person to sleep in?
I'm sure you could. Like I was reading about some people making like homeless lots for people. Usually they have a tent, but they've got a bush for the bathroom.
Well, right, but you can sleep in the bush.
I don't think it gives you much rest, but I think you could. You might see your sim die young, but that's about the only consequence to it.
I want that now. I want like the tiniest lot possible where all they have is the bush. And then like, I mean, you have to be able to eat, but that takes care of your sleep needs. That takes care of your potty needs. You can do the woohoo in there. Like that is 4 in 1, right? Or 3, however many numbers in one right there.
Yeah, you just have like 12 kids and just keep making extra bushes on the lot for them to sleep in.
Everybody gets a bush.
It's like a chicken on every shelf.
I don't know if you can get somebody to claim a bush, Tony, though. That would be
interesting.
That would be ideal if they just like prefer to sleep in a bush.
I like that they just like fall over into the bush too to go to sleep. It's not like settling. It's just like straight up pass out.
And you see their feet just sticking out of the leaves. It's not very clear how these bushes work physically.
Yeah.
There's a lot of room in there. It's kind of a TARDIS situation.
A dimensional pocket bush. That's why it's like $400.
Have you heard about this movie that's releasing this week, Tony, called Tickled?
I have not. You were like you mentioned the name beforehand, but you're like, we're going to talk about this on the show.
Well, so I don't even know because I haven't got to see it yet. It's not in wide release, although I have been reading a lot about it. It is a documentary that starts out kind of as a comedy thing, where these two guys look into. They find this post on the internet for signing up for the World Championship of Tickling. And you can go to like Los Angeles and they'll pay your airfare or whatever. And like the post on the internet was just sort of like, hey, how long can you last? And they go down this rabbit hole where they figure out that it's this weird, like it's a fetish that these people are engaging in. And they start getting harassed by this like shadow group of people who are engaged in this fetish, but like one guy in particular who is the king mafioso of the tickling fetish comes after them with lawyers as they're making this movie about this weird tickling thing. I say weird. It's fine if you're into it. I'm not like judging anybody's thing, especially if it's tickling.
Yeah, that's about as harmless
that's about
as it gets.
Innocent. Like, other than just, I put my penis in your vagina, you don't even have to have a penis or a vagina. if you just get off on that, that's like asexual practically. But it was apparently it's blowing people's minds because it's this odd mixture of comedy, but then these guys legit feel like that their lives are in danger several times in the movie. There's like a car chase where they're getting chased around by these shadowy figures and getting sent threatening messages by this. I've never been as interested in a movie about tickling. Granted, maybe the first one I've ever heard of, but still, this is fascinating to me.
I've seen movies that like incorporated like the tickling thing before, like just as like little asides, but I've never seen it as the focus. And I've seen people that are really, really into that kink, like just tied up and like they're basically just getting tickled by anybody who wants to walk by.
But the fascinating thing, too, is that the movie is out now, right? Like, it's been made, it's been screened at film festivals, and it's had its premiere and stuff, and it should go out to more theaters, I think, pretty soon. But the guys are still being hounded by whoever this figure is. I haven't seen the movie, and there's a lot of people who are sort of like, we don't want to spoil too much, so I mean, I've read some stuff online, but I haven't delved into too much spoilers. And so I don't think I'm giving you guys too many spoilers, but whoever this guy is who starts hounding these documentary filmmakers as they're making their documentary is still coming after them now. So it's almost like you could make a Tickled 2 about like releasing the movie and the continued adventures of these people being harassed legally and, sort of emotionally by this whoever this guy is.
Sounds like he's just psychotic.
Even say anything.
It's just crazy.
Well, I don't know, Tony. I have not seen the movie. There might be. It seems people who have seen it are very, very moved, if that's the right word, by it. Very intrigued by it. Maybe it's that film festival effect we were talking about earlier, but it really seems like something that I want to see. And I'm hoping that it gets a wider release so that more normal schlubs like you and me can see it, and we don't have to go to somewhere far away like New York or Hollywood.
Yeah, hopefully that's one that ends up on Netflix sometime.
Well, I'm sure it'll end up on VOD or whatever, but it's only in theaters now, and it seems like there's a lot of buzz about it, but not a lot of people who can actually see it, which is a weird situation to be in when you're, I kind of troll a lot of the movie forum type places, and you hear about a movie, sort of like when The Witch was coming up in the festival circuit, right? And you're like, everybody's like, oh, The Witch, but nobody, like no real people had actually seen it. Yeah. We're not even real people anymore, Tony, because we do this all the time, but
we're becoming part of that whole like film festival circuit, man. We're above the plebs.
Little bit by little bit. That's why it's cool for me to spoil movies. Ha! No, it's not. Speaking of upcoming stuff, there's also a new trailer for the HBO Westworld show. Have you seen that, Tony?
I have not. Like I'd read a little bit about that series coming out, but I haven't seen a trailer for it.
Did you see the original movie Westworld?
I did not.
Okay. The original movie is just sort of like a techno-apocalypse, not apocalypse sort of thing, but the idea is that there's a park where you can go and there are robots that let you live out your weird historical fantasies. So let's say you want to go to the Wild West and be a gunslinger, you can do that. And they have gunslinger robots, and they have other worlds. They have Roman world, I think, and future world. And the computers start to malfunction, and it's about a guy who has to face down evil robot Yul Brynner gunslinger who actually starts shooting people. But in this, it's interesting because it takes a little bit of a different viewpoint. It actually starts to sort of show the robot side of things of, hey, we look like people. We're programmed to think like people. What are we? Are we real? Are we not real? You guys have, he talks to a lady at one point and he says, are you one of these people who's a simulation? And she says, well, if you can't tell, what does it matter? And I thought that was sort of, it looks amazing too, by the way. The production value looks great. The Old West stuff where there's, Indians riding on horses and, the kind of gunslinger aspect of it. I can't wait to see those two worlds collide in a sci-fi, weird, fiction-y kind of way, but also with a little bit more philosophy than the original movie had. Michael Crichton's an interesting writer. He had a lot of ideas, but I think sometimes his, he didn't have a lot of depth to what he was saying. He was just sort of like, what if science was bad, but also good? Explore.
Oh, that's another good thing about it being an HBO series instead of a movie is you actually have time to check out the philosophy behind things.
Speaking of HBO, Game of Thrones coming to an end this week. No spoilers at all, but man, has it been a tense season.
Yeah, it's been possibly the most rapid fire season yet, just with so much happening so quickly. And it
does feel like they could have put some of the stuff that happened this season, spread it out back somewhat.
Yeah, they could have made season 5 a little bit richer with some of this stuff. But
yeah,
we run a recap every week, so that's where you go if you want all the spoilers. We're definitely not going to talk any details about what happened this week.
But it is an interesting storytelling conundrum where they had the books to go on, and now they're largely out of the book era. And so it feels like the books are, take their time telling a lot of these stories, and they almost felt beholden to, all right, we got to stretch this out, you guys. And now you get to this and they're like, all right, we know all the story points. Let's go, 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 go. And they're going to end according to what they've talked about. And this hasn't actually happened yet, but they're discussing doing 2 more half seasons, 6 episodes each. And it feels like there's a lot more story they could tell.
Yeah, it feels like there's 3 seasons left. So
maybe stretch this out back. I mean, you can't do that now, obviously, and they're done with shooting. Whatever next week's holds. All right, well, by the time this comes out, it'll be in 2 days. The finale will be coming out. But either you could save some of this for later. It's a weird conundrum they find themselves in, and I've heard people talk about this season as being kind of fan service. I don't think that's 100% true, but they have been sort of knocking down a lot of pins in the we think this might happen kind of roster that people have developed for Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and it's every fan theory is getting addressed right now. Even if not all of them have been completely shown, they've thrown a little bit more of the evidence towards the fans.
So it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be. I wish that either go at this pace the whole time and don't drag out stuff like season 5 was kind of dragged out, or go slower the whole time. But it's a weird kind of change up, and it's not acute. I don't mean to complain too much. I'm really enjoying the show, but it feels different somehow this season, and I think in a good way. It's fun to have these kind of things be revealed.
That was some of the more fun cosplays I saw at ComicCon this time was Hodor.
I'm gonna have to bleep some of that stuff, Tony, but yes, that does sound. Having heard that, the only person who will hear that, I am amused by that image.
I'll have to text you that image.
By the way, you want to give us a rundown on Comic-Con? Talked about what you saw, who you saw.
Yeah, this was.
I was struggling I was like, what are we going to talk about? We have 8 more minutes. We were in the podcast. I'm out of topics. The internet is utility, you guys. The court somewhere said so. That's really interesting. I'm a lawyer now.
Yeah, we're here to interpret law. It's like that account that was tweeting us earlier today knew everything about business.
The show can't turn into let's recount our Twitter feeds, but man, did I have fun with that conversation.
Yeah. Well, if you go on Twitter and ask us about it, there was some weirdness going on, some trolling, some back and forth action. But at Comic-Con this weekend, it was a little bit different than last year, because last year I had a table and I felt like I had to be there to pitch the whole time. Like I talked to hundreds and hundreds of people. I was throwing business cards and stickers and just just getting out there and doing it. And then this year I was media again, so I just got to go to everything I wanted to, and I got to skip all the lines. So I'm going through, and like the first day it's like, all right, I'm gonna go and just go see Carl Urban, and I'll be like 3 rows away from him and listen to him talk about Dredd and talk about all these other things that are awesome. Talk about the new Star Trek, get the inside scoop on all these different stories about different actors, and just like go through all of this. And the first thing that happened when I posted that picture to my Facebook was, why did they allow a country singer here? Because they thought I was talking about like Keith Urban. Because that
was your mistake, putting it on Facebook.
Yes, and that's why Facebook. But it was like the best thing about this, or one of the best things about this podcast, is being able to be the media person that kind of gets to be up close and personal. Like whenever I went to Stan Lee's panel, after the energy that Carl Urban put out, I was like, man, this might be a little depressing. He's 93 years old. Is he going to be able to do it? And it's like, oh yes, he can do it. That dude commands a room of 5,000 people better than I could ever dream to, and he's 93 years old. Like, he's sitting there the whole time hitting on the hot host. He's going through all these stories. He's answering questions. Some questions are dumb, and he's probably been asked them 10,000 times. Some questions are actually really good. And the way he has so much flow and the perfect stories, like, I loved hearing him give us the origin story behind Iron Man. And I'm sure some people out there already know this, but the way he described it, and this is it with all the Stanley-isms, the little gravelly voice, the little back and forth that he has kind of with himself. And he just looks into, like, he looks at the person asking the question, brings the microphone up, and he's like, Tony Stark came about because I was drunk with power. And he goes into this story about how it's during the middle of like the Cold War, and people are starting to hate like military industrialists, how they hate the war that's going on, how they're starting to hate billionaires. It's kind of like right now with the Bernie Sanders stuff and the 1%ers and the Occupy Wall Street. And he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make the character that they hate the most, and they're going to love him. And like, that was the entire reason why he made Iron Man. Like, just to prove that he could do it. Like, everything he's done just somehow is magic, it seems like. He even talked about a new character called the Annihilator that he's coming up with. It's the first original character he's made since She-Hulk. So it was just so cool being a few rows away from him. I had a picture taken, but it was like, 15 seconds being put right next to him. He looked a little bit grumpy in the picture. Every other picture he was smiling in, but he was grumpy with my brother and I.
Well, maybe, did he come up with Thor?
I'm not sure if he came up with Thor or not.
I was going to say, maybe he was mad that the people who know comics history are going to be pissed off if he did. But I was like, maybe he was mad your brother was repping somebody who wasn't his property.
I honestly don't think that, because he was talking to people that were in like DC stuff. The first question somebody asked was such a douchey thing. The first question was like, who would win in a fight between Batman and Superman? And I'm like, you should be kicked out of this theater right now. It was just so dumb. Why would you ask that of Stan Lee?
What did he say? How did he respond, this master of oration and crowd control?
He mostly just kind of looked around the crowd for a little bit. And he's like, and he basically said, why are you asking me this? Sit down.
That's what I like to see. That's the kind of thing. If you're going to be if you're going to be up there on a stage, and I saw, this is way lower level, but when I went to Pensacola ComicCon, there was a filmmaker there who's also on a podcast that I like a lot. His name was John Schnepp, and he was showing his documentary, The Death of Superman Lives. And he took questions, and he was just totally willing, if somebody was going on or monopolizing, his time, he'd be like, all right, hey, listen, you had your say, now I'm going to talk, okay? Be quiet. And you just got to know how to, yeah,
some people know how to control a room like that. And
you have to be rude. You have to be a little bit rude, right? And I'm maybe not great at that. I've never been in that kind of situation, so maybe I would develop it, but it's not for the timid or like, can I talk now? Like, you're not going to get to talk if you're like that.
Yeah.
I went to some panels that were like that with people who didn't run them very well at Pensacola ComicCon.
Yeah, there's panels can always get just hijacked by people. Like, I've seen it before where one person will talk for the entire 45 minutes. They won't let the other people that are on the panel answer any questions. They won't let the moderator talk. Like, there's definitely people like that. Then there's jerks in the audience who want to control the entire conversation too. So like you kind of have to be rude a little bit, and it's only being rude to the one person because the rest of the people in the hall, if you do it right, are going to be on your side. It's like when a comedian heckles somebody who's just yelling random unfunny stuff out. Like you're being mean to one person, but it's for the benefit of the entire group. So don't be that guy.
Hopefully you're not being mean. In the case that I was mentioning, John Schnepp, he wasn't like, you're an idiot. Why would you go sit up? He wasn't being rude. He was being brusque. He was very direct in saying, okay, stop talking now. I'm going to talk. He was communicating clearly, but not like, I think you're dumb and I don't like you and your hairstyle is weird. It wasn't one of those kind of rudeness. It was just sort of, I'm in control of this room and you're here to talk to me and everybody else is here to talk to me, not to you. So you had your question. I will answer the question. But stop talking.
And it's
great guy.
It's funny seeing how much of these guys actually go into fan service as well, because Stan Lee is definitely doing a little bit of the fan service stuff. Probably the person who did the most was Carl Urban, though. He walked up, and before he said anything, he just dropped like 4 different movie quotes. Like he did that, like I am the law, and so on and so forth, with like 4 different movies of his. Then he walked to the chair, dropped the microphone, walked off the stage, and then came back out and started answering questions. But the whole time he was dropping movie lines. He definitely knew what people were there for. He was having fun with it. And then one of the other major ones I got to see was Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who is Negan in The Walking Dead. He's the comedian in The Watchmen. He was very, very briefly Batman's dad in the new Batman versus Superman, which he was talking something kind of interesting with that, where he's working to try to get Flashpoint Paradox made where he would be Batman. And he's trying to get Zack Snyder to get that going.
Well, of course he is. He wants to be Batman.
Yeah. I understand what he's...
If we had Flashpoint Paradox, he's saying, I would be Batman? Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, it was just an interesting way that he was talking about it. Like, they've talked with producers. They're not sure it fits in yet. But if they want that DC movie, I could see him being a really, really good Batman, or the alternate Batman anyway, which Flashpoint Paradox we've talked about before. It's an alternate timeline where Bruce and his mom get killed, but the dad survives, and he becomes sort of a pseudo Batman that's a lot more violent.
Yeah, it's a great... I'm wondering how they're going to pull that off in some of the other media that they have.
But I'm not sure that any of the offshoots for Marvel or anything have been that much of like a one-off alternate timeline. So I'm not sure that there's any precedence for that actually working. So we'll see if that actually comes together. But it was awesome seeing him on stage because he was just a super warm person. He's not quite as charismatic as Stan Lee or Carl Urban, but he put on a good panel. He answered a lot of good questions. Whenever he saw a girl in the comedian cosplay, he brought her on the stage. He had his son up there while he was talking about a bunch of stuff because it was Father's Day, and like his 5-year-old kid was there. It was just a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed getting to go back to the panels this year because last year I didn't go to a single one, even though there were several I wanted to go to. The only one I really missed out on that I wanted to see, but I didn't realize that I had missed my window, was Lena Headey, who plays Cersei in Game of Thrones. She had a panel there, and I really wanted to see that. And then all of a sudden, I was like 20 minutes late for it.
I've heard she runs a good panel.
Yeah. From what most people were saying, it was pretty, a lot of people were irritated because it was pretty much ask questions about Peter Dinklage to her.
Oh, yeah?
So, I don't know if she was allowed to run the panel that she would normally run, but I'm sure it was still pretty good.
Was here's my most important question. Was Carl Urban still trying to convince people that Dredd 2 is going to happen, even though it clearly is not?
He was talking about how if it happens, it's probably going to be in a slightly different form, that Valiant Comics is working with Netflix and people like that to try to turn it into a series, and that he would gladly play that even if it is a Netflix series. So it's one of those where if the movie happens, it's probably not going to be a direct sequel to the one that they made. He definitely said he enjoyed it and that it's the most challenging role he's ever had because you don't get to act with your eyes, so you don't get to put any sort of expression. You get robotic with it, and you're trying to act with your chin.
You could sort of pick up the story after where he was at and not necessarily reference any direct. I mean, if they're gonna sell the comic to Netflix, you could still have the rights to it. I mean,
yeah.
You can still have the sort of same visual elements and still be in, Mega City 1, without it being this is definitely a sequel to the movie. It just sort of takes place later on and has different story elements because they wrap that story up. It's not oh my goodness, there was this giant plot hole or hanging thread that we needed to resolve.
They had it definitely set so that there could be a sequel, and Anderson was pretty much the fan favorite in that movie. Like, people liked the sort of the psychic deal that she had, and she brought a lot more of a human element to the character. So I think that if they tried to do it again, they would do well to remake that character or cast the same woman for it. We'll see if it ever happens. Like, he was definitely very enthusiastic about it. He was really excited about DVD sales and all that sort of stuff that all the Dredd fans are big on. But he kind of blamed a lot of the advertising and everything else. It just didn't have a lot of, like, people weren't really aware that it was happening at the time because it got overshadowed by so many other projects.
That happens sometimes. You'll have a movie come out and you're like, wait a minute, that came out? Wait. Oh, it came out with those other things that I was maybe not that interested in, or maybe a little bit interested in, but I didn't go to see. And it just, stuff gets buried.
Yeah, it's like UHF coming up against like Raiders of the Lost Ark and 3 other major movies.
Like this Tarzan movie that's coming out this week, Tony. I'm actually kind of pumped for this.
It looks better than I thought it was going to. Like, whenever I heard they were making a Tarzan remake, it looks like they're sticking a little bit closer to Edgar Rice Burroughs' vision of Tarzan as well.
But they're also going up against, the Independence Day with, if you're going to go watch a big dumb movie,
it's going to be Independence Day.
Yeah. Like, Roland Emmerich is the Edgar Rice Burroughs of the cinema.
Yeah, pretty much.
And you're going to go watch that and then be like, well, maybe it's sold out and I'll go see Tarzan, but that's a rough competing weekend.
Yeah.
The summer is kicking off with some interesting movies. I've read some good reviews for the Independence Day, though.
Have we decided if we were going to review that or not? Like, if we were going to do a bonus episode?
Nope, we have not decided that.
There might be a bonus episode. It'll come out before this does.
Tony will do Independence Day and I'll do Tarzan.
We could definitely do that, too.
I think that wraps it up for this week, Tony.
For sure. And
with some cuts for things that might have been spoilers and whatnot.
Yeah, that's at Al's discretion. He might not cut anything. Who knows?
I will cut plenty. I will beep and cut and zip, and it'll just...
We'll add challenges to his editing. But anyway, just want to thank you guys for listening, for all the times that you've come and hit thumbs up on our videos, for subscribing, for basically spreading the word about the podcast. If you want to help us, there are a lot of ways to do it. The number one way, though, is by becoming a member over at humanechoes.com. It gets you access to bonus content like the bonus podcast, which is probably the best thing that we make. It gets you a bunch of pins, it gets you shirts, it gets you all sorts of things depending on the tier you choose. Go to humanechoes.com and click on the Become a Member link at the top. Another great way to support us that doesn't cost you anything more is through our Amazon affiliate link. If you click on the right side of the site where it says Our Books, or sometimes at the bottom of posts where you just see an Amazon link, it will put a cookie in your browser for 24 hours. Anything you pick up after that point, we get a nice little cut of. Like, we have people buying all their office supplies, we have people buying treadmills, all sorts of cool stuff off there. It's a great way to support us without costing anything extra.
And speaking of things you can do to support us, if you're tweeting out the podcast and mentioning that you're listening and telling other people about it, that is huge.
Yeah, it's definitely
That
big.
is really helpful. That if you're telling your friends about us, if you're letting people know that you enjoy what you hear here at the Human Echoes podcast, growth is what we can use. And if you don't want to do any of those other things we mentioned, please tell people if you listen and you like us.
Thank you very much. Hope you guys have an awesome week. We are coming back with Stitches?
Stitches, recommended by our fan
Christina Durner.
Yes, Christina Durner. I'm sorry, I blanked on the name. I talked to her on Sunday, I believe.
She whooped my ass in the arena, I think.
Oh, did she? She's coming to. She came to us and asked if we'd seen this movie. We get a lot of fan requests, and this is not going to turn into any movie that you ask us to do. We will do. But if there is a movie that you're interested in and you think it's in our wheelhouse, definitely bring it to us. We're going to try to be doing a little bit more of that, of sort of interacting. If there is a weird movie that you're just like, I just want to force them to watch this movie, that's what Viewers Choice Month is for. And that'll be coming up in August, I believe, or something.
But we're always open to suggestions.
Yes. So thank you so much for those interactions. We will see you next week with that review. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you then.
Bye.
And there, pull the lever. Oh my God.
Oh, this is so much fun.
What in the hell?
This is so much
Pull the lever! We just walked up to the lever! Oh my God!
You kind of flooded your fort there, Joe. What's going on?